Right. Can you hear me now? I think that was the issue. Can you hear me now? Okay. Just waiting to hear from you. Yes, you can hear me, and you can see the image, I hope, which is an image of a couple of people on a camel. Yeah, all good? Great. Okay. So I have quite a bit to go through this evening. I'll see how much I can get through, and I may do a part B on this. Yeah, so all sounds good there. Great. So this is actually a PDF that was sent to me by my Chinese contact. And I was trying to learn off how to say thank you in Chinese before this started, so I'll probably get this wrong, but it's something like xie xie or something like that. Well, that's my attempt at saying thank you for all the help. So our kind friend has offered some answers to some of the questions. Now, he did revise this PDF, but there's such good stuff in the original one that I want to share that I thought it was worth sharing it. Okay, so the question was, are those figurines Sogdians? And he says, not likely. Very low possibility, since all paintings and murals about Sogdians that archaeologists could find so far suggested they didn't wear hats at all, or just small flat top hats, but not the Phrygian types. And he gives this image here from some murals from the Samarkand during the reign of King Fark-Human, 648 to 651. Now, he did go on to point out, as we'll see in the second half of this, that actually that's not quite correct. In their own territory, the Sogdians didn't typically wear hats. And if they did, they wore hats like, as you can see here, kind of flat caps. But when they visited the Tang court, then they dressed appropriately. And they fitted in with the Chinese styles. And we're going to see how that looked like. Now, I don't know if I can, this may not work so well. I'm just wondering if I can scroll down here. Let me just see what the problem is. No, it didn't. It doesn't seem to be allowing me to. Let me see if this works any better. Can't. Fortunately, this hasn't worked to plan. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to just remove for a second and see if I can go down the way a bit here. Okay. So this is probably an awkward way of doing things, but in any case, so this is another image of the Sogdians there, and you can see it up at the top. They're wearing flat hats and they're riding on some camels. It's not exactly clear which type of camel, whether it's the Bactrian camel or if it's the Arabian camel. It's hard to know if it's one or two humps camels. Okay, so I'm going to be flicking back and forth. A question from Ricardo, I see in the chat there. Why is their clothing important? Well, to identify who exactly were the Tayaye, it's a kind of in response to Murad's videos from about a year ago, where he was claiming that it was the Sogdians that were in charge in the 1st century. It's my view that the Sogdians and the East Iranians were more involved at a later stage, the 9th, 10th century, and this is reflected in the art. I believe in the 7th and 8th century, we're talking primarily people from Iraq and Iran, Western Iran. We're not talking about further east, and the figurines are important to make that case. And so from time to time, I will be unsharing in order to move to the next part of our display. So let me just share this one here. It's a bit slow here. Okay, so here's another example. These are ambassadors from Chiganian. Central figure has got an inscription of the neck, or on the neck. And then you have Shak or Tashkent. Okay, so you can see that they are either not wearing a hat or they're wearing a flat hat. This is potentially some form of hat. And we'll see examples of that. I hope that you can see this okay. I think I've figured out how to work this. I'm just going to come back to the StreamYard just to see. Yeah, you can all see it. So I've worked out how to scroll down. Now, this is from the, I hope I can pronounce this correctly, Afrasiab murals. Okay, and the different groups are identified. So this is quite a handy thing to have. So we have King Karkuman of Samarkand, 648, 651, and there's various groups identified here. There's seated Turkish courtiers here. Now, do you notice what's distinctive about them? They all look like heavy metal supporters. They all got long hair. So there's the typical appearance of Sogdians, or the Turks. Okay, and you can see it again here. Turkish guards, seated Turkish courtiers. You got Changanian delegates here, Turkish officers. And here you have the Tang in the central part. Okay. Turkish guards and so on. Okay. You got Korean delegates with their own distinctive style here as well. I think this is very useful so that we can actually identify who is who in the various pieces of art. Okay. Now this here is depicted as nations from the West. Okay. So this Shaganian, and this is nations from the East. I'm going to just show you a map here for a second. I'm going to stop share this for a moment. Just come back. And let me just share picture, a map. Hopefully I have it handy. Okay. If I can't, I'll have to skip that part. Let me just see if I can get it. It may not be possible. I did it beforehand and there was no problems. Apologies if I'm a bit slow here. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, right. Now, hopefully you can see this. So this map is very handy. So you have the Tang dynasty in dark purple here. You have the Tang protectorate here in this area. And then from here to all the way to Merv, you got the Sogdia area, with Samarkand being one of the most important places, as well as Balkh and Bukhara and Merv and Tashkent. And then you have the Sasanian Empire over here, with Ray sticking out as it being an important spot. And then further west, you eventually get to Iraq. In terms of yellow, we have independent Hindu kingdoms, and you have the Harsha's empire. So hopefully that will help. So essentially, all along here is the Silk Road, and there are peoples heading east to the Tang court at different stages in history. And the Chinese are painting them and making figurines of them. And these figurines are being buried with those Tang rulers. Okay, so that's the significance of that. Now, if we get back to our PowerPoint, or not a PowerPoint, our PDF. Okay, so that's the significance of these groups of people. All now, in this case, they're visiting the Samarkand king. Okay, Samarkand king is essentially king of the Sogdians. He would be sort of halfway between Iraq and China, essentially. So an important midpoint. Now here's some more. As you can see here, no Sogdians wore Phrygian caps in mural paintings. There's quite a few of them, as you can see, wearing no hat and long hair. And some of them are wearing flat caps by the looks of it. Okay. Obviously, this is not the full picture, as we'll see in part 2. This is sometime in the 6th or 7th century. It's the Phrygian murals. Okay. Here's another one. It's quite clear. It looks either like a headband or possibly a low cap, but it's certainly not a Phrygian cap. Okay. And very distinctive dress there, very elaborate. Sogdian men feasting and eating at a banquet. Okay. So that's how they looked. Okay. A Sogdian tomb found in Anyang in Henan province. Okay, so here's another depiction. Here's another one again. Okay. Oh, this is a group from Turan. Okay, these would be how the Sogdians would have dressed. Okay, so typically long hair, and you can see how they're dressed there. Okay, so this is a far cry from the depictions of the Arabs. Okay, now, are those figurines Turks? Definitely not. Turks don't and didn't cut their hair at all before they were converted to Islam in the 10th century. So, so if we see any figurines with short hair, it's not the Sogdians. Now, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, long hair was part of their style. Afra-Siab murals in Samarkand during the reign of King Karkuman, 648-651, which I think is here. You can see the long hair that they typically had. Okay. And here is a petrographic drawing in Mongolia. Okay. And here is the Shirun Bombagar tomb mural from the 7th century AD, Mongolia. Again, you can see the consistency of the long hair. And we got the tomb of Anki, who died in 579 AD. Tomb location is Chang'an. Apologies if I'm murdering the accent or the pronunciation. Anki is an ethnic Sogdian living in Shu, China, in the 6th century. Okay. Now we have a kind of contrast there between the Sogdians and the Turks. Okay. Interesting. What is that there? I have no idea. Is that a black stone or something? I have no idea. Looks curious, let's say. Now, for the same. Okay. So the Turks on the left and the Sogdians on the right. Now, I don't know the intricacies of the distinction between the two groups. This is all relatively new to me. But as you can see, it looks very much like the modern Islamic symbol, isn't it? But I wouldn't read too much into this because the Islamic symbol of the star and moon is a relatively recent phenomenon. I think we're talking the 19th century, but still in all, curious. Final note there on this one. Turks didn't cut their hair before their conversion to Islam in the 10th century. The Sogdian definitely don't wear Phrygian caps either, only wearing flat top caps. So who were the people wearing the Phrygian caps? The answers are most likely the West Asians, Persians or Arabs in the Mesopotamian region or Turkey. Now, this later got revised. My contact is an expert in Old Chinese and Turkish linguistics, but he did consult a colleague that would have a greater expertise in these artifacts. And so as a result, he got back to me, and he sent me some more information. So I would I just see a note from Chuck. I think Sogdian is an Iranian language, or Iranic language. I suppose East Iranic, if it is, because Iran, Greater Iran, covers quite a big area. Hello to Father Brian Lynch. I see you're in the house as well. Right, so we're going to go on to part 2 now. The first thing I should point out is that I'm going to be showing you a video, which will line up in just a second. Let me just, first of all, share this next PDF, just to kind of introduce that. Okay, so this is a note from my contact. Dear Mel, I would like to introduce a very common headdress called Pu-Tou or Fu-Tou before talking about those figurines from the 7th and 8th century Tang, 7th century Tang period's tombs. And so what he did was he sent me a video clip and he said to go and watch it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop this, go over to the video, I'm going to play it through. And it's in Chinese, but it's kind of self-explanatory. It's about a 2-minute, clip I'm going to show you. And let me just come back. An apology that I'm doing a lot of switching and changing here. Here we go.
明显，有点过于明显了，很厚。样衣模特图呢是对花的，当时还吹了一波，但是大货呢是没有对花的，这一点呢还是相当失望的。第4层呢，就是我早早已经戴上的夫头，还有手里的这个唐制的这样的一个革带。这个呢其实是一个叠蟹带，只不过我还比较懒，还没有把它那个叠蟹带下面垂下来的那部分给它接上。叠蟹带本身呢是胡制，最初呢可能源于古代的中亚地区的粟特骑士，他们呢经常骑马打仗，这种腰带对于他们而言呢就非常的实用。梦溪笔谈，没错，就是那个沈梦溪，也是那个沈括，对此呢就做了详细的叙述。接下来呢，我先给大家演示一下这个夫头怎么戴。首先呢，有一个这样的网罩，然后把它呢戴在头上，让它这个后衫呢稍微向中间，向头部的这个百会这个位置垂直，然后呢就把网巾盖在头上，选取正面，面朝自己，然后这样子一扬，是吧？这头有点歪了，然后往下这样一耷拉，这样子先罩在这个头部上，然后先把后面的这个小绳儿，然后再这个颈下打结，然后把它这个布料呢捋到这个耳后，抓住前面这2片大的，这样子捏住，布料稍微不那么皱叠，然后不用使劲的往下压，就这样松松垮垮的，然后盖住眉部，然后系紧。为什么要把这个系在颈下呢？就是因为害怕你刚才捋那个后面那个大带的时候呢，把这个后面这个大带呢给它也系到前面，很不方便。然后把这个布料呢就全部都堆到耳后之后，向上翻折，在头上，记住大家是头上而不是额上，就是这个后衫正下方，然后打结，系紧打结。然后呢，大家会发现这地方呢多出来了这么一块布料，用2只手在这一侧把这个布料呢这样子捻到这个夫头内部。
Okay, so just coming back to you there. So there we have it. That is the hat that we are seeing so often in the Tang paintings. It's easily to confuse with the Phrygian cap. It looks very similar. It's a very odd shape hat. It looks, if I may be so brutal, it looks like a pair of gentles on the head. That's the shape of it. It's a very odd one. But interesting. Let's get back to what our friend has got to say on this matter. And I think you'll find it enlightening. Okay, so he talks about that there are different types of these hats. They're called Pu-Tou. So this is kind of a correction on his earlier PDF, but he says many almost Sogdian and other West Asian figurines found so far were wearing Pu-Tou or Fu-Tou. They were possibly serving in or employed by the Tang government. So that's the important point. If they're working for the government, they obviously dressed accordingly. And so that's why you have people from further west wearing what is really the Tang style of dress. Okay, so there's quite a broad range of figurines here. I won't go through all of them here, but Prince Yidir's tomb, 682 AD. As you can see, there's a different style to this one. But most of the other ones are pretty similar, and it's pretty obvious that we're looking at the style that we saw in that video. And as you can see, the dates of these 685 to 701, 655 to 684, and so on. There's a good spread of dates. So basically, the 7th century into the 8th century, and a range of tombs. It's pretty consistent. This one here reminds me of Elvis. But yeah, so I think the evidence is pretty strong that while it may look like a Phrygian cap, I think what we're really seeing is a Chinese style headdress, which is the Pu-Tou or Fu-Tou. This one is from 723 and so on. Okay, so I think the evidence is pretty strong. It says here that one became a military official in the Tang court. Not sure which one meant. It might be this one here, possibly. Now, this one to me, actually, I wouldn't say it's a military person. This to me looks like a Nestorian bishop. We have the dove on what is a mitre, and I think that's the explanation there to what this is. So I think this is probably a Nestorian bishop that is being depicted, in my view. He says some became a civil service official in the Tang court. This one here. Some became royal guards to the emperors. Okay, this is from Princess Chang Li's tomb, who died in 621 AD, 643. Some of them became civilians within Chinese society. For example, became horse or camel leaders, as you can see in these pictures. Okay. And you can see the dates and the tombs that these were involved with. Some became acrobats or entertainers. Look at those for leopard skin trousers. What is that? I can't remember the name of that string instrument. I'm sure some of you can tell me. Is it a mandolin? Something like that. Nice tummy on the guy there. And became a polo player is depicted here. There you can see polo being played, the ball there in the center, and they have the long sticks. I read recently that football was called football because it was distinguished playing with a ball on foot as opposed to being on horse. Actually, I think this is the ball here, actually, rather than here. Okay, so that's from 685 to 701, and as you can see, they're wearing the Pu-Tou headdress there. Clearly, these West Asians were partially or fully adopting Tang's costume. They either wore Pu-Tou or Chinese Tang dress, so it is absolutely not possible to differentiate them as either Persian, Sogdians, or Arabs. All we can tell is they were not Chinese Han people and were Caucasian people from West or Central Asia during the 7th and 8th century. So, like with so much in terms of research, it's one step forward, two steps back. We can certainly rule out certain things and rule in other things here. Some of them didn't adopt the Chinese costume when they were in China. For example, here is an example, and they It's from an anonymous tomb in Gansu province. You can see that they're wearing a Sogdian headdress there, not the Tang one. Okay, and same over here. Some of them were still wearing their own costume, as we can see from these examples here. Okay. And here is a reconstructed Sasanian costume by modern artists. I think this is the one here. Now, what's interesting here, this is a picture of Khosrow II and Queen Shireen, and it's interesting how similar the style there is with Abdel Malik. You know, the famous standing caliph look with the sword in hand. I think this is probably even a better depiction of it, but it seems like that fits in with a Sasanian fashion, if you like. So, yeah. Now, what races were wearing front opening coats with lapels between 7th century and the 9th century? This is another question from a viewer. Almost every race was wearing front opening coats with lapels, including Chinese, between the 7th and 9th century. So, fortunately, we can't narrow it down from that dress. The front opening coats with lapel were first worn by Turks, then adopted by Sogdians, and then by Chinese, Uyghurs, Tibetans, Tocharians, and even Persians and Nestorian monks. For example, worn by Turks. I think this is one example here. We have the open lapel. So you can see from the hair that it's I think it's meant to be Turks in this case. It's quite hard to keep track of when we're looking at Turks and when Sogdians. So you'll forgive me if I make mistakes between the two. This is again a petrographic drawing in Mongolia from the 6th century, and again you see consistently the long hair. And then worn by Chinese, the open lapel. So plenty of examples there. Okay, it just served a practical purpose to keep people warm, particularly going through the mountainous areas of Central Asia, if they are just traveling outside in the colder weather. So nothing distinctive really. And worn by Tocharians in nowadays Afghanistan and Central Asia. From Zigong-2 Portraits of Periodical Offering 526 AD to 650, which I think is the next one here. Okay. Now from left to right, invoice from Beyti, Balkh, Afghanistan. Ilu Dan, Kunduz, Afghanistan. Lilbatan, Kabijan, Tajikistan. Ilpan-To, Tashkent, or Tajikistan, and Ilua, which I cannot pronounce, but it's Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. So as you can see, you have the open lapel. So there's a lot of similarity across the different regions, really, in terms of that. Okay. And worn by Persians, and here is the same style of open lapel worn by Persians, and even by a Nestorian monk from Syria. So it was pretty prevalent everywhere. So we cannot judge envoys' ethnicities and nationalities by their coat wearing either. The reason why front opening coats with lapels were so popular at that time is probably they are suitable for traveling along the very cold, windy and snowy Silk Road. Another question is, so what were they wearing between the 7th and 9th century? This is a mural painting depicting mourning princes from various kingdoms from cave number 198 in Mogao, 1000 Buddha's grottos in Donghuang County, Gansu Province, China. The mural painting was created in roughly the 8th century. From the painting, we can see how various kings or emperors or shahs were wearing. We can see how they were dressed. I think that's what I was meant to say there. Okay. So this is quite an interesting one here. So we have identified a Tibetan whose face has been cut off here, the Tang emperor, Korean, an Indian, Persian, a Sogdian here. So it kind of gives us a good indication in terms of how we can distinguish one from the other. Okay, we'll go into this in a bit more detail. This mural painted in the Tibetan period shows the Tibetan king, also known as Chan Po, standing in the front. So that's him there. Let me see, where is he? This guy here. Unfortunately, his head is missing from the painting, but luckily the image of Pitsan Po's head was preserved in the French sinologist P. Pelliot's black and white photo album about his trip to Dun Huan in 1908 AD. On the right side of Pitsan Po is a Han Chinese emperor escorted by 2 court ladies. Other figures are identifiable by their costume as lords and dignitaries from the West and Central Asian regions. Some Turks on the bottom part of the picture are severing or mutilating their ears and noses, or stabbing their own chest with a knife. Now, this is going to be of huge interest, and this is a bit of a discovery which I think my contact may or may not be conscious of. The practice of self-mutilation was associated with the funerary customs of the Turks. The scene illustrates the extreme grief expressed by the secular followers of the Buddha when they hear of the latter entering nirvana. This painting not only depicts their devotions to Buddha, but also accurately presents the appearances, garments, and customs of different nations along the Silk Road and the history of cultural exchange between them. Now, why am I especially interested in that? So you see that there? The knives, they're stabbing themselves with the knives. I'm thinking honestly of the Shia who stabbed themselves in memory of the death of Ali and his sons. What if this is actually custom that has been taken from the Turks and has been imported with the Turks? It wasn't a custom then from before the 10th century, because we're talking about the 10th centuries when the Turks came into the area, if I'm not mistaken, and well, I'll have to double check on that. But we're definitely not talking about the Turks coming in the 7th and 8th century. So I would suggest that this is a bit of a smoking gun that could indicate that this custom came with the Turks. And if it's not native to Mesopotamia, as we've assumed that it was connected with Ali, then what is happening? We've got the Buddha and Ali being confused, or a custom that was practiced in relation to the Buddha being adapted and used for the Shia wing of Islam. I think that's a mind blower. Now, I'm literally seeing that as I'm reading this. You know, I don't know. Do the rest of you think that's possible? It certainly looks like that to me. The practice of self-mutilation is so peculiar, and why is it not practiced among the Sunni, and yet it's practiced by the Shia? Is that where it comes from? Does it come from the Turks? Okay, anyway. So here is the Chinese Tang emperor. Okay. And here is 13 emperors drawn in 600 AD to 673 AD. Okay. Now we have the Tibetan Pitsan Po, where the head is missing. We have that black and white picture, which gives us an idea of what it would have looked like. Okay, and you can see the similarity in the hat. Now, these headdresses will be helpful when we're trying to identify the different groups. So here we have a Sasanian Shah, okay, depicted by the hat there. If I just go back up here for a second, we can see it in the context of the painting, hopefully. So we have it here. Now, it should be pointed out that it's very similar to the Sogdian, except for this style. That's the big difference there. Okay, and we have the Korean king. You can see they've got an unusual, distinctive headdress. I think if they were at a race course, I think they would be depicted as fascinators rather than a hat or a cap. It's very unusual. Okay. And 13 Emperors comes from this collection. Now, just as a side note, he says, even by as late as the 13th century, we still don't see caliphs depicted wearing clothes like people from the Hijaz. Okay. He has here, Abbasid Caliph al-Mamun sends an envoy to Theophilus from the history of John Siklites. I have no idea how to pronounce that, sorry. So here is Caliph al-Mamun, and here is Theophilus. So you can see how he's dressed, headdress there. So that's worth bearing in mind. Okay. Now, here is another picture. Again, we see headdress of the Arab leaders there. Okay. And that's it. Now, I'm sure I will receive a lot more in further weeks ahead. So I just thought I'd share all that. I know that was quite a lot to take in. Hopefully this will be a good video to go back to if you are trying to make sense of particular pictures or figurines and you want to identify which part of the world are we talking about. So as I say, I'm still relatively new to all of this. This is Murad's field of interest, you know, the Turks and the Sogdians and so on, whereas I've been more interested in Iraq and I suppose Iran to some extent as well. But it's worth exploring. Now, I think what's kind of significant really in terms of the figurines, I think to bring it back to what the whole point of all of this was, we see Muhammad and his followers depicted as Asian or Chinese, we'll say Far Eastern Asian, let's say. But I would argue that this isn't because they were actually Asian, these leaders at the beginning. I think this just reflects the fact that the Turks took over from the 10th century onwards, 11th century and so on. And then it's around that time that we see this artwork, and obviously they're depicting the founders of Islam in that way, obviously in a way which suits their own interests, because the standard Islamic narrative is constantly being tweaked according to whoever's in charge. And so one way of tweaking it is you depict the founders to suit the ethnicity of the people currently in charge to kind of buttress their claims. It's the same thing we're seeing all the way through. Going forward, as we take apart the kind of what you call the babushka doll of Islam's standard Islamic narrative, we find that there are dolls within dolls within dolls as we go through history. You know, we see one doll, which is the standard Islamic narrative, but actually, you know, if we really kind of zoom in and look really closely, what we see is a narrative that is constantly being tweaked and changed right through time. And it has resulted in multiple surahs, and we haven't even touched on those yet. And I'm looking forward to having Lloyd de Jong back to talk to us about what he's discovered with those surahs. I think that will be really helpful. So that's it for today. I'm going to keep it as short as I can. I think we've done about 40 minutes, which is about the right length. Don't want to go into an hour and a half, 2 hours and stuff like that. Hope that was helpful to you all. Thanks a lot for showing up. And I hope, as I say, will be a good reference video for you to check out figurines and paintings against to kind of work out the ethnicities of the leaders at different times in Islamic history. Okay, so thank you for watching. Talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.